Dusk comes early in Boston's autumn. As the trees in the upscale Brookline neighborhood turned orange, dinner preparations were complete in the spacious two-story Harrison home. "Mom, is this sauce for the foie gras okay?" Melissa Harrison called from the island kitchen. In her hand, she held a silver spoon, its smooth surface glistening with a red wine and berry reduction sauce. "Perfect, Melissa," Vivian Harrison smiled as she placed her hand on her daughter's arm. "Your brunches are always wonderful." Elite Property in New York was fortunate to hire such a talented real estate agent. Melissa smiled at her mother's words, but behind that smile lay complex emotions. Her mother's compliments always included a reference to her profession, as if being a Harrison daughter was the reason for her career success. Harrison Properties was a mid-sized real estate development company that had been operating in the Boston suburbs for over 20 years. The founder, Walter Harrison, was the driving force behind the company's growth to its current size and was known in the local real estate industry as Steel Walter. At his side was Vivian, known as a socialite. Vivian's refined taste and extensive connections were important elements supporting Harrison Properties' high-end direction. "Is Dad in his study?" Melissa asked, looking out the window. "Yes, he's reviewing new project plans with Ryan. Now that he's earned his MBA, Dad finally seems relieved," Vivian said, elegantly brushing back her hair. "It's truly wonderful to have a son who will carry on the family tradition." Melissa nodded silently. Her brother Ryan had always been viewed with expectant eyes by their parents. When he went to graduate school to take over the family business, Walter had even arranged for an interview article to be published in the local newspaper. "Melissa, I have good news," Vivian's voice brightened. "James Bradley is coming to brunch today. I hear he recently started teaching at Harvard Business School." Melissa inwardly sighed. Her mother's matchmaking efforts hadn't subsided even after she moved to New York 4 years ago. "Mom, I told you I'm seeing someone." "Ah, that construction worker," Vivian's voice contained obvious contempt. "I can't understand why an educated woman like you would waste time with a mere laborer." "David is not a mere laborer," Melissa said in a quiet but strong tone. "He's a site supervisor with a responsible position. And he's the most thoughtful person I've ever met. But for a woman of your background—" "Mom, let's drop this subject," Melissa pretended to focus on finishing the dish. She had met David Hammond 6 months ago. At a Manhattan luxury condominium construction site, he was giving instructions to workers. Melissa was inspecting the site before a property viewing, and when she slipped on the stairs, David caught her. That was the beginning of everything. Attracted by his sincerity and humble attitude, Melissa invited him for coffee, which he accepted. David introduced himself as working in construction and said he lived a simple life. However, his depth of knowledge and level of education were beyond what one might imagine from his appearance or profession. 2 weeks ago, David had gotten down on one knee in Central Park and proposed to Melissa. She answered yes, without hesitation. However, when she told her parents about the engagement, their reaction was predictably cold. Walter made no attempt to hide his anger, raising his voice saying, "I can't imagine my daughter marrying a mere construction worker." Vivian cried, lamenting, "Think of our social standing." Still, Melissa did not change her mind. After a long discussion, her parents reluctantly agreed to a dinner meeting. Melissa had made a reservation for next Friday at La Maison, one of Boston's finest restaurants, for a formal introduction. "Melissa, could you help me?" Turning around, she saw her father Walter standing with documents in hand. "Could you fax these papers? They're presentation materials for a new contract with Hammond Construction." Melissa took the documents from her father. "Hammond Construction. It's Boston's largest construction company. We've been trying to secure a contract with them for over 10 years, but it's been difficult," Walter frowned. "Robert Hammond is not a man easily persuaded." Melissa said nothing. David's last name was also Hammond, but it must be a coincidence. If he had any connection to such a large company, he would have mentioned it long ago. He always spoke modestly about his work and never bragged. That was one aspect of him that she loved. Sunday morning, sunlight streamed into the Harrison family's spacious dining room, making the silver cutlery sparkle. Melissa gently squeezed David's arm and smiled reassuringly. This was the first day he would meet her family. "Everyone, this is David," Melissa introduced him with a nervous voice. "David, this is my father Walter, my mother Vivian, and my brother Ryan." David politely extended his hand. His clothing was simple but clean, and his hair was neatly groomed. "It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Harrison." Walter exchanged a brief handshake with a cold expression. "So, where do you work?" The question was thrown out before pleasantries were complete. "I work for a construction company in New York." "I'm a site supervisor," David answered in a calm voice. "A construction worker," Vivian raised an eyebrow and reached for her wine glass. "And your parents?" "My father works in construction. My mother works in accounting." "So, a subcontractor," Vivian's voice contained obvious disdain. Melissa blushed. "Mom. Where are you from?" Vivian continued, ignoring her daughter's protest. "I grew up on the south side of Chicago," David answered honestly. "The South Side?" Walter interrupted. "That area is known for its poor safety." Melissa took a deep breath to control her anger. "David is a wonderful person. Don't judge him by where he's from or what he does." "Judge? We're merely confirming facts," Vivian said coldly. "We Harrisons are a real estate dynasty spanning generations. Melissa's great-grandfather developed Boston's first upscale residential area." "That's an impressive lineage," David responded calmly. "Which university did you attend?" Walter asked sharply. "Northwestern University. I majored in architectural engineering." At this answer, Ryan suddenly showed interest. "Northwestern? That's an excellent school. Since you studied architectural engineering, you must have learned structural mechanics." David nodded. "Yes, I was particularly interested in earthquake-resistant building design." "Interesting," Ryan leaned forward, genuinely intrigued. "Recently, we've been planning a new apartment complex with seismic-resistant structures." "Ryan," Walter interrupted his son. "Let's leave business talk for later." As the meal progressed, Vivian focused on conversing with James Bradley, who sat to Melissa's right. He was indeed handsome and cultured, and seemed proud of his new position at Harvard Business School. "James recently published a paper on real estate investment," Vivian said deliberately loudly. "Melissa, wouldn't you be interested in that?" Ignoring her mother's intention, Melissa held David's hand. "David is working on a new luxury condominium project in New York. That's where we met." "You mean Hammond Tower?" Walter suddenly leaned forward. "That's a Hammond construction project, isn't it?" David hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, it is." "Are you just a worker there? Or are you deeply involved in the project?" Walter's eyes held a calculating light. "I'm a team member," David answered humbly. "I'm responsible for site safety management and process control." "Interesting," Walter said thoughtfully. "Our company has been trying to work with Hammond Construction for years. They don't easily accept new partners." "Dad!" Melissa protested. "Don't try to use David." "Use? I'm just talking business," Walter feigned innocence. "Our company has struggled for 10 years to get approval from major construction companies," Walter continued. "A contract with a company like Hammond Construction would instantly elevate our status. To be honest, your family isn't on par with ours." "Dad!" Melissa raised her voice. David calmly put down his cup and looked Walter in the eye. Mr. Harrison, I believe a person's worth isn't measured by titles or property. I love Melissa with all my heart. Her happiness is my priority. Idealistic, Walter dismissed him. Look at reality. The world isn't that kind. Then let's look at reality, David said quietly. I love Melissa. She loves me. We want to get married. This is our reality. Tension ran through the table. Vivian put down her glass and gazed at David with cold eyes. If you truly love Melissa, you should consider her future. Social status, stable life, the environment she's accustomed to, can you provide those? Mom, please, Melissa pleaded. I have the right to decide my own life. After brunch, Melissa walked David to the door. Despite feeling her family's gaze, she kissed him. I'm sorry, she whispered, resting her head against his chest. They're always like this. David gently stroked her hair. It's okay. I understand your feelings for your family. With time, they'll understand too. Next Friday is our formal dinner meeting, Melissa looked up at him. Will your parents be able to come? Of course, David smiled. They're looking forward to meeting you. Melissa gave her parents a final warning. For the dinner meeting at La Maison, please at least be polite. David's parents will be there too. Meeting construction workers' family at Boston's finest place, Vivian sniffed. I can't even imagine. Melissa exhaled deeply. At least in a public place like a restaurant, her parents would probably maintain basic courtesy. She held both anxiety and hope for Friday's meeting. Friday night, La Maison, in Boston's Back Bay district, was wrapped in elegant light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, and polished silver cutlery was neatly arranged on pristine white tablecloths. This upscale French restaurant was known as a special place in Boston's high society. Melissa arrived with her parents 15 minutes before the reservation time. Her emerald green dress accentuated her tense expression. Please, just don't say anything rude today, she pleaded quietly to her parents. What would we say? Vivian answered while adjusting her expensive pearl necklace. We'll just state facts. Melissa was about to argue when David and his parents appeared. David was dressed in a navy suit and looked a bit more nervous than usual. Next to him stood an older man with dignified features and an elegant woman. Melissa, David approached and kissed her. These are my parents, Robert and Catherine. Robert stood tall with a dignified demeanor. His clothes were modest but clearly well-tailored. Catherine was dressed with understated elegance and wore a warm smile. Melissa, we finally meet, Catherine took both her hands. David has told us so much about you. I'm delighted to meet you too, Melissa replied sincerely. These are my parents, Walter and Vivian Harrison. Walter made a short bow with a disgruntled expression. Vivian displayed a perfunctory smile and said coldly, "Good evening." Her eyes surveyed the Hammond couple's attire appraisingly. I'll show you to your table. A waiter appeared and led them to a 6-person table by the window. When taking seats, Walter deliberately chose the position furthest from Robert. Melissa and David sat facing each other, with their respective parents beside them. I'll bring the wine list, the waiter said. Bring us the finest champagne, Walter commanded. Tonight is a special night. Conversation was awkward at first. Vivian began with talk of weather, which Catherine politely responded to. Robert observed silently, occasionally nodding. The champagne arrived. Dom Perignon, 1985, the waiter proudly showed the bottle. An excellent choice. After the glasses were filled, Walter proposed, let's toast. To our children's relationship, he emphasized the word relationship. Everyone raised their glasses. Next, the waiter came to take their food order. Today's course starts with foie gras tranche, followed by lobster bisque, with Chateaubriand as the main, he explained. Excellent, Walter said. That will be for the four of us. Excuse me. Melissa was confused. Four? Walter laughed coldly. Yes, just us Harrisons. Dad! Melissa exclaimed. What about David's parents? The waiter looked perplexed. According to Mr. Harrison's instructions, meals are only for half the table. That's ridiculous, Melissa said, blushing. Please prepare the course for everyone. No, that's fine, Walter raised his hand. Follow my instructions. What do you mean? Melissa's voice trembled with anger. Vivian elegantly shrugged. Construction workers from the slums? They don't need food, do they? Mother. Walter joined in. Our standings are different. We have different social positions. Melissa was about to stand up in anger, but David gently took her hand and stopped her. His expression was calm, but determination showed in his eyes. Melissa, it's all right, he said quietly. Catherine Hammond, who had been silently observing until now, smiled gently for the first time. You don't know our real jobs, do you? Though softly spoken, those words changed the atmosphere at the table. Vivian, still sneering, said, Oh. Your jobs. What does a construction worker's wife do? Make lunch boxes for construction sites. Catherine said nothing, but opened her elegant handbag and took out a gold card. She slid it across the table where it stopped in front of Walter. The card read, Hammond International Construction, and underneath, Owner. The blood drained from Walter's face. He stared at the card, then looked up at Robert. You are. I am Robert Hammond, founder and CEO of Hammond Construction, Robert spoke for the first time. His voice was low and powerful. I started the company alone 30 years ago, and it has now grown to be the largest construction company on the East Coast. Melissa gasped. She looked at David, who was smiling somewhat apologetically. And this is my son, David Hammond, the next CEO, Robert continued. He was working under an assumed name to gain field experience, which we consider essential for anyone in a leadership position at our company. Our company policy is that those who will lead should know the realities of the field. The entire restaurant seemed to fall silent. Vivian was frozen with her wine glass in hand. Walter's face had turned pale, with sweat beading on his forehead. Hammond Construction. Walter repeated. Our company has been trying for over 10 years to secure a contract with you. Yes, I know, Robert said calmly. I've seen proposals from Harrison Properties several times. Unfortunately, they haven't met our standards so far. David held Melissa's hand and said gently, Melissa, I'm sorry I lied to you. But I wanted you to get to know the real me. Not for my title or wealth. Melissa stared at him with a confused expression. Various emotions were crossing in her mind, a sense of betrayal, yet understanding his intentions, and anger at her parents' shameful behavior. Catherine gracefully stood up. Let's have dinner somewhere more comfortable. Melissa, please join us if you'd like. But. Melissa looked at her parents. Melissa, David looked into her eyes with a serious expression. I'll respect whatever you choose. But this is who I really am. I want you to understand that the attitude your parents have shown is incompatible with our family's values. Robert gave Walter a short nod. Mr. Harrison, we'll discuss business another time. Tonight is for family. Walter and Vivian just sat there stunned. The founder and son of the major corporation they had tried to build a relationship with for over 10 years were their daughter's fiancé and his family. Their rude behavior had been intended to insult a mere construction worker, but in reality, they had insulted powerful businesspeople who could impact their future. Melissa stood up and took David's hand. David, we need to talk. He nodded. Of course. She gave her parents a cold look. "We'll talk later." Melissa, David, and the Hammond couple left the restaurant. The autumn night breeze swirled around them as Melissa tried to organize her thoughts. Catherine thoughtfully went ahead with her husband, giving the couple time to talk. "I'm sorry," David said quietly. "I didn't expect you to learn the truth this way." Melissa stopped and looked him in the eyes. "Why weren't you honest from the beginning?" Her voice revealed confusion more than anger. David exhaled deeply. "To be honest, at first it was just coincidence. I was working under an assumed name to gain field experience before taking over the company. When I met you, I was planning to tell you that I was the heir to Hammond Construction. But you didn't." "No," he admitted. "You treated me normally even though you thought I was just a construction worker. At that moment, I thought, if I want you to know the real me, I want you to see me as a person, not for my title or wealth." They began walking around the common garden. The night park was wrapped in quietness, and streetlights cast long shadows of the two. "All my life, I've been the Hammond's son," David continued. "In college, in business, even on dates. Women were attracted to my wealth and status, not to me. But you were different. You saw me for who I am." Melissa listened silently. There was truth in his words, yet she also felt betrayed. "Melissa, meeting you changed my life," David took her hand. "If you can accept who I really am, I promise no more secrets from now on." "I need time to think," Melissa said quietly. "My feelings for you haven't changed, but I need to process everything that happened today." "I understand," David gently squeezed her hand. At that moment, David's smartphone rang. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's from my father." After answering, his expression gradually hardened. "I see, right." After a short conversation, he hung up. "What is it?" Melissa asked. "It's about your family," David chose his words carefully. "My father wants to talk. He's heard business rumors." "What rumors?" "That your family's company, Harrison Properties, has been exploring unethical means to obtain Hammond contracts for the past several years." Melissa turned pale. "What?" "Corporate espionage, interfering with competitors, and possibly even bribes," David said gravely. "My father doesn't have definitive proof, but he's heard the same story from multiple sources." "But that's..." Melissa struggled for words. She had been proud of her father's work since childhood. However, thinking back on her father's recent behavior, she did have questions about his ethics. "I can't believe it," she murmured. "If it's true..." "I'm not blaming you," David quickly said. "This has nothing to do with you. I just want you to understand the situation." They arrived at the hotel and met the Hammond couple in the lobby. Catherine immediately noticed from Melissa's expression that she was upset. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Melissa smiled weakly. "Just a bit confused." Robert Hammond said quietly, "Melissa, there's something I want to tell you about the relationship between our company and your family's company." The four of them sat in the hotel lounge. Robert explained the facts matter-of-factly. For the past 10 years, Harrison Properties had taken various measures to obtain subcontracting work with Hammond Construction. Initially, they were legitimate business approaches, but over time, their methods gradually entered gray areas. "Walter even tried to steal our internal information," Robert said quietly. "He hired our former employees and induced them to leak confidential information." Melissa felt an urge to cover her face. Fear welled up that her entire life might have been built on lies. The family business she had been proud of, her own career, everything felt questionable. "I didn't know anything," she said with a trembling voice. "Of course," Robert said gently. "We're not blaming you. We just want you to understand the situation." "But why now?" Melissa asked in confusion. Why didn't you say anything when David started dating me? At first, we weren't sure if your relationship with David was genuine, Catherine answered. And when David said he wanted to show you his true self, we respected his decision. That scene tonight, Melissa began to understand. David held her hand. I'm sorry I lied to you. But my feelings were real. They still are. After a long silence, Melissa steeled her resolve. I need to talk to my parents. I feel like I saw who they really are for the first time tonight. Are you thinking of revenge? David tried to read her expression. No, Melissa slowly shook her head. Not revenge, justice. When I think about what values I was taught in the home I grew up in. She broke off. I need to show my parents the truth. What they've done, and how wrong it was. Let's go together, David suggested. I won't leave you alone. Melissa finally smiled genuinely. Thank you. Let's make a plan to confront my parents. They talked until late at night, considering how to proceed. By morning, Melissa had recovered from her confusion and embraced a new determination. She loved David. And now, even knowing his background, those feelings hadn't changed. But she also understood that she needed to confront her parents with the truth. A week later, Melissa and David visited the Harrison home. Walter and Vivian greeted the two at the doorstep. Their expressions were hard, their eyes downcast. Inside the house, Walter, once dignified, now had slumped shoulders, and Vivian's usual haughty attitude had subsided. We need to talk, Melissa said calmly. She was suppressing her anger toward her parents, maintaining a professional attitude. We should be the ones apologizing, Walter began. His voice was weak, his usual dignity gone. That night, we behaved shamefully. It's not just that behavior, Melissa said firmly. Corporate espionage against Hammond Construction, inducing information leaks, and sabotaging competitors. I know everything. The blood drained from Walter's face. Vivian let out a small cry. They tried to make excuses but lost their words before Melissa's cold gaze. We were facing bankruptcy, Walter finally said weakly. We needed that contract with Hammond. That's still no reason to break the law, David said quietly. Silence dominated the room. Eventually, David began to speak. I have a proposal, he said with a serious expression. Integrate Harrison Properties as Hammond's real estate division. Walter and Vivian looked surprised. But there are conditions, David continued. Thorough business ethics and participation in social contribution projects. And I have a condition too, Melissa added. My parents must volunteer for the new low-income housing project. I want them to learn true value there. Walter and Vivian initially showed resistance but realized they had no choice. It was either the company's survival or criminal charges. Why are you helping us? Vivian asked curiously. After what we did. Because Melissa is important to me, David answered gently. And because I believe true value lies not in looking down on others, but in helping each other. 1 year later, Melissa and David's wedding took place. Relatives and friends from both families gathered at the venue to celebrate the birth of a new bond. Walter and Vivian had lost their previous arrogant attitude and instead acquired a new humility. Their experience with the low-income housing project had changed them. Under their formal attire, their hands now bore proud marks of labor. Vivian leaned close to Melissa and whispered, "We were wrong. A person's worth isn't in titles or property." Melissa gently embraced her mother. "I'm glad you realized that." Harrison Properties had become a division of Hammond Construction, and Melissa led ethical development projects as the head of the real estate division. David had begun his role as CEO as promised. Our story is full of lessons, Melissa said to David, raising her glass. That honesty and compassion are the most valuable things. From the living room of their new home, they could see the Boston skyline. And in the distance, they could also see the construction site of the low-income housing project they were jointly undertaking. The Harrison couple had become actively involved in community service and had begun to earn respect from the community in the true sense, not just for show as before. True value lies not in titles or wealth, but in honesty and compassion for others. That would be the lesson Melissa and David would pass on to their children.